Welcome to another episode of A Swift Kick in the Ass. This is your host, John Curran. And today I have a very, very special guest with me. I'm so excited because I have one of my oldest friends here.
Literally.
He is literally my oldest friend. Um, and he's the first guy that I met in college at the University of Florida. And I was thinking about it. I think it was in January of 1985, not December.
Well, yeah, well, it had to be because I was there during the fall, and I think that's when you got there was the spring term.
Yeah, I got there in the spring.
Right.
So Scott was the first guy I met on the in the dorms on my floor. And we, I guess, formed the core of our group of friends who we've had since that time, who we all met all around the same time, and really brothers from another mother.
Correct.
So this is a special interview. Uh, Scott is calling me from Colorado. He is a licensed professional counselor and he works in corrections. Now, we're going to protect the innocent here. We're not going to, he's not going to do therapy. This is not about therapy. This is
Absolutely not.
this is about Scott. Uh, this is not about his job. Although that's going to be mentioned because let's just face it, what you do is a profession, and that is your life, right?
Correct.
So, one thing I also wanted to mention while I have your attention is Scott also is the guy who I've mentioned on this podcast before. And he's the guy who said, "John, listen, you're being a real jerk." And he's, called me out and basically stopped me. He said, "You're on a bad path and you're becoming a real asshole." He says, "You're not an asshole yet, but you're if you keep doing these things and you don't start thinking about your actions and acting more appropriately, yeah, you're going to be a, a, a chronic asshole," I guess. And that took a lot of guts to do. And that showed me what a true friend he was. And he's also part of the same group that was friends with Kim Bergalis, who is a friend of ours that we met in college. And she died in December of 1991 from AIDS. It was determined, I believe, in court that she was purposely infected of AIDS by her dentist. Now,
Correct.
I'm mentioning some of this, like going back to 1985, because Scott has a very, very interesting story. Now, we talk a lot about positive change on this podcast, and Scott lives on his terms. He has been received lots of kicks in the ass. Uh, and what I mean by that is that he's gone through some things that you just you don't want to go through. So the first thing, and I guess I'll just start it out by saying that Scott lost his parents at a very, very young age. You lost your mother first and then your father. But let's just start. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, I think that's really, I look at kicks in the ass as challenges, and that was probably one of my biggest challenges was when I was 12, my mom passed away from cancer. Um, Within that year, my father remarried to my mom now. You will distinguish my birth mother from the mother who I lost and my mom now, who's my current mother. He remarried within a year of my birth mother passing. And then probably a year after they married, he passed away from a heart attack. And not only was that challenging enough, but at the time of my father's passing, I was 14, I think. I was put in a position where, not willingly, where I had to make funeral arrangements for my father, which was very traumatic in itself. And I think when it comes to anything that I go through in the future from that, and it's challenging, I always look upon that experience as, I got through that. I managed to get through it. I did what I needed to do and got through it. So whenever I come across a situation where I'm challenged or anxious about, I always look at that incident and realize, oh, I got through that. I can get through this. This is nothing compared to that. So I really use that as my baseline of pushing myself um, to get through a difficult decision or situation.
Yeah. So one thing I didn't mention, and I wanted to because I think it is pertinent. It is one of the other swift kicks in the ass that you've received is that you grew up in a very rich family down in South Florida, and went to school in limousines. The show had a chauffeur, right? He would take you to school, and all of a sudden, at 14, you are now having to make decisions about your father's funeral after just losing your mother,
Mhm.
and also dealing with a new a new mother.
Well, a new family all in itself, actually. It was that my mom, had adopted my brother and I while my father was alive, and then he passed. So we were like basically our whole family changed. I mean, what the family I knew before my birth mother passed away to the family I received when my father passed away and my mom took care of my brother and I, a completely different family. So my whole environment changed within a 2-year period, drastically.
Man, I can't even imagine. I really cannot even imagine what that was like.
And the whole chauffeur limousine thing, that time period really lasted only like a year. It was never something that I grew up with or that was lasting past my father passing away. Because I mean, we could go into a lot of different things, but to make a long story short, is my father lost a lot of his money due to a bad business deal, and when he passed away, we were in major debt. And not only did
Mm,
my mom have to take care of my brother and I, but she had just given birth to my youngest sister, and she came into my the marriage with my dad with her own daughter. So with 4 kids she was dealing with, let alone having a lot of debt and having to take care of these 4 kids all by herself, So it was a very stressful situation, to say the least.
yeah, it just makes just has my head spinning really about it as I think about it. At 14, to have that load, thrown on you, and so did you know you were gay at that time?
Well, you really dive right into it. Um, well, again, being gay was, and again, I can only speak from my experience. I'm not going to generalize it to what everyone is.
Oh, I know. This
Everyone's
is about
different.
you.
Everyone's experiences is different. But um, I look back, I was gay from the moment I was born, I mean, I remember,
You didn't
again,
choose this way.
at 5 or 6, I wasn't like, like having sexual fantasies about other guys, but I had a closeness that I would feel with boys than I did any, girls and stuff. It was just this closeness. I couldn't label it. It wasn't sexual at all. Being gay is not necessarily, well, it's definitely not just a sexual thing. It's a whole being. And again, I can only speak for me. Um, Now that I look back, I was born gay and been that way for the very longest time and really didn't come out um, until college.
Yep.
When I came out, there were no role models out there on how to come out, what to do, what not to do. So I really actually, honestly, in my head, didn't even label myself as homosexual. I just knew that I liked guys, but I never attributed the term to being homosexual because it was such a um
There was a stigma attached to
Yeah,
it.
it was very much a stigma back then. So I didn't even internally or intellectually um, label myself that way. Um, so
You,
in college,
yeah,
after
you were
my
actually the first person that ever came out to me. In fact, I think you've been the only person that has ever come out to me. And I remember when you did, you know, you sat me down and you told me, and I really thought that you were kidding me. I really thought that you were just like, because you know, I came from a very homophobic family. My father was extremely homophobic, and I just thought you were pulling my leg. You know, you're trying to open my eyes and realize that I was being a homophobe as well, because you weren't hitting on me or anything like that.
well, definitely you're not my type, John.
Right. Oh, I know. And, you
But
know, now that you said that, so
and
Scott is
I think
available.
let me add to that is that not only was were you heterosexual that I came out to, but all our friends were heterosexual. I had
Yeah.
no friends that were gay that I could even talk to, and my own family, they were not they were not supportive, but they weren't very supportive. I mean, I remember my mom when I came out to her writing me a letter, explaining, "Hey, there's some place we could send you if you wanted to change where you could be
Wow.
heterosexual."
So was
And
that
at
in
that
college
point
when you did that?
what?
Did you do that for your mom? That letter to your mom, was that back in college?
Well, this was a letter that she sent me when I came out. I had gone down there, um, and actually with one of our friends, I went down there and I came out to her and my whole family. And when I returned back to college, I got a letter from her stating, look, if you want to, there's a place we can send you where you could change, blah blah blah. And I remember, and at that point I had become pretty secure with myself, and I wrote her back stating, well, is there a place that you can go to change? I mean, it doesn't work like that. You are who you are. So again, I wasn't shunned from my family, but I certainly wasn't supported in that I was not accepted like you would think nowadays. Really, the only way I got through the whole coming out and accepting myself and being good and feeling actually really comfortable with myself was through our group of friends, which coinky dink were all heterosexual. They knew me well enough to accept me for who I am and actually push me to get to meet other gay people. And in college again,
We're
though it
still
was
we're
not
still doing
very
that, Scott.
accepted, there were enough avenues and outlets for me to go to where I could actually meet people. And I befriended some people, and I, went to some bars where I could feel comfortable and meet other people. And it got to where I was truly accepting of myself. Again, it was through our group of coinky dink all heterosexuals, which is very
We
unusual in a
knew where to
situation
go,
like
right?
huh?
We knew where to go.
No, you didn't know where to go, but you pushed me to look through. You guys certainly didn't know where to go. But again, there were enough on our college campus. There were enough places where if I wanted to, I could seek to go to, which I did. Which only then allowed me to feel more comfortable with myself and in my own skin.
So are you doing that now in Colorado? Because that you're starting all over, right? I mean, you've only been in Colorado a couple of years now.
Well, I was in Colorado in the early 90s. I was here for a year. And at that time, when I came out here, I joined a support group, and a support group where you could meet other gay people. And I really got to meet some really cool people and really became good friends with them. One of them actually, killed himself later on. But
You were that good of a
nowadays,
friend?
there's not really any support groups out
Sorry.
here because I mean, being gay is really not a big deal anymore, so there's really no support groups for it because it just is. I mean, there are
Wow.
probably social groups I could join,
Mhm.
But have I done that yet? No. You know, just kind of just been in my one of the things about
So
me is I'm a
what
very independent person and I kinda do things on my own when I want. I don't necessarily need to be part of a social group and need to go out and meet people, though it probably would be beneficial for me to do that. I don't necessarily need to do that. I mean, I'm gonna be 60 next year, so when it comes to putting that kind of energy into something like that, I already have a group of friends that I care about. None of them are gay. Um, well, no, actually, that's not true. I do have one very good gay friend that lives in North Carolina that I still keep in contact with, and he comes out here and
I'm
we go out. But that's really
I'm still
the
holding
only
out
time I
hopes
really
for
go out.
Frankie.
Huh?
I still think I'm holding out hopes for Frankie. He hasn't
I
been
don't
laid
even
in
know
a
why you
while.
would even mention that.
Hasn't been laid in a while.
Yeah, but he's certainly
He
not
might
gay.
have a better chance. I'm just I'm just kidding. You know what? So as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Scott and I are longtime friends. We have a group of friends that we've known for 40 years, over 40 years now. And I told each and every one of them we would probably be dropping some names during the podcast and saying things about them. And the only way they're going to know what we say is if they listen to this podcast,
True.
right? So it's all really in jest. And I'm sorry, suicide is not a joke. It's a very serious thing. And if you're thinking about suicide, you need to get professional help or seek professional help just immediately. It don't take your life. That just
And
take
I
that
think
up
also the
up
suicide
shaft.
hotline number is 211. So if you or anyone know anyone that is contemplating hurting themselves, that's the best way to start. And the best thing
Yeah.
is also to let someone know, talk about it. And
So
don't be afraid to ask someone either. You're not going to put that idea in someone's head. So if you feel like someone's contemplating it, ask them about it.
that sounds good. Good advice. And from a professional, not me,
Right.
um, who has no, I am not a mental health professional, as my listeners know. This is just entertainment for me or from me. Um, let's go back though, because so you went to Colorado, you said in 1990, but so Kim died in 1991.
Right.
And, prior to AIDS, um, there was really, I mean, there was a sexual revolution back in the 70s where there was free love and, people didn't worry about sexually transmitted diseases back then because everything was curable, right? So it was like a free for all back then. And quite honestly, when you're growing up and you're trying to develop your own sexuality, that scared the hell out of me. Like the concept of orgies and uh, swinging, and like, I mean, that just blew my mind as a kid. It really did scare me, and it was almost like when AIDS hit, I was like, oh my gosh, I kind of almost, I hate to say, felt relieved that I needed to take a step back. It was okay not to be sexually active because I was still, still learning. I mean,
Right.
but I guess, in college, I mean, I had sex back in high school. So, but, you know, I had not had it much back in college. I had a big dry spell after high school. But anyhow, life, what I'm trying to get at is the way we all viewed sex was very, very different. And I'll also say too that the sexual revolution was focused on straight sex.
Right.
It really, you know, gay sex was not talked about. Um, kind of just enclosed private groups, I guess.
Well, I think in the 70s, yeah, but then I think in the 80s, um, you know, again, homosexuality was a psychiatric disorder at one time. And they took that out of Diagnostic to Statistical Manual, which is a DSM, which is our like Bible when it comes to mental health. They took that out, and I think it made homosexuals normal, normal, I guess I should say, you know? So I think more people were coming to terms with their sexuality, feeling comfortable. Um, and I think that's when people started feeling comfortable having sex with other men. And at that time, that's when HIV started to come around. It was the gay cancer from, if I remember. And at that time, when I was in college and coming out, sex wasn't even a thing. I wasn't even, I had not engaged in any sex up until college. Nothing in high school. Even the first couple years of college, not. In fact, my first sexual experience was probably my junior year of college, you know. Um, and that time, that's when HIV started coming out, and it made me have a lot of trepidation about engaging in sex and who I had sex with. So, for someone coming out and just starting to experience, sex, it was such a um, pill to swallow to be able to, have to remember, all this stuff going on with HIV. So it was a really tough time, and of course that's when we met our friend Kim, who had gotten HIV infected from her dentist purposely,
Right.
you know. And then we realized that you could contract HIV not just through sex, but just in exchanging of blood. So it really was a very profound time for all that stuff to be happening, but also trying to come to terms with, you know, trying to not only find yourself, but also be sexually active, you know? So yeah, it was a very, very interesting and an interesting time. And not a lot of people can actually relate to that nowadays because things are so different now. Though, I mean, with the current climate, we seem to be taking some steps backward, but that's a whole different subject, you
Yeah, that
know?
I agree with you. And and it's okay to talk about that on the show because this is, we talk about the terms of our life, and that is one of the terms that I think we all face. Our own sexuality is, and yeah, it does seem like they're trying to roll us back culturally to a
Well,
time
I
where,
think if you look throughout history, I think we ebb and flow when it comes to certain things. I mean, we become very conservative and then very liberal, very conservative, very liberal, and I think we're entering a very conservative part of our history. Um, so I'm hoping I can kind of stick through it and come out the other side, on the liberal part.
hmm
But I mean, again, I'm certainly not going into any closet anytime soon. So I am who I am. It's just I'm just hoping that my rights don't change and go back as far as the ability of getting married, the ability of being able to talk about being a gay, read about gay stuff, see gay
or
people on
just
TV,
being at your partner's
movies.
bedside if they're in the hospital or maybe they're sick and they're dying. I mean, I lived in Atlanta for 15 years and I met a lot of gay couples. And it just, I really developed a lot of respect for gay couples because society is so looking down on, you know, mixed couples, gay couples, or anybody but, if unless you're straight and white,
Well,
basically,
I mean,
it's frowned
let's
upon.
also. I think this is a good time to bring up the fact that in the early '90s, again, I was completely comfortable with myself. You know, never, if I was gay, and I never introduced myself that way, but I certainly never hid it.
Yeah.
At the time, I was working in with children in foster care. Um, and I then got involved and have always wanted to be a parent. So I then made the choice of becoming a foster parent. Um, and at that time, again, I was single, always been single. and I was a single gay man, and um, decided to be a foster parent on my own. If I had not been working in foster care and that the foster care agencies knew me as a person, I don't know if I would have ever been able to be a licensed foster parent and actually be a foster parent for children. But coinky-dink, I was able to do that because they knew who I was, they knew me as a person, they knew me as a professional. So they were very okay with me being a foster parent to kids. And I actually was a foster parent to um, God, throughout my 3 or 4 years doing it, probably 4 children. I had a sibling group of 3 and then one who was an individual, by himself. And up until this day, and they're all adults now, and one of them has their own kids right now, very, very close with them. In fact, when I mentioned family, um, they're very much a part of my family. So
Yeah.
very much in touch with them now. You know them. Um, and they're very much and their kids are very close to me. They call me Uncle Scooty, that's how I'm known, and that's the way they've always known me. So, again, back then, that if it had not been for me working with foster children and in the foster care environment, I don't know if I would have actually been able to do that. Um, I want to kind of refocus on challenges. That was a very challenging time in my life because I was single. Again, always single. So when I say I was
Always
single,
single.
it
We're
doesn't
going to
mean there
get to
was
that,
ever a time where I
Scott.
wasn't. But I did that all on my own. I had the support of my friends and my family, and I had a lot of concerns whether I could do that on my own. But one of the things I always look back on, like I said in the very beginning, was if I could deal with what I dealt with as a child, the death of my parents and all that, why can't I do this? Why can't I, you know, push through the anxiety and grow as a person, and not only grow as a person for me, but help an individuals, become their own person. So that's really what pushed me to become a foster parent was, facing what made me very anxious and uncomfortable and growing from it.
Hmm.
I look at challenges like that. Challenges cause anxiety. Everyone deals with anxiety, and it's how you perceive it and how you can either coexist with anxiety and just deal with it on
So
a day by day basis.
anxiety is fear of the future,
Is what?
fear of the future.
Anxiety is just fear, period. Uncomfortableness, with what's unknown. Not necessarily the future, it could be any current situation. But, you can either coexist with anxiety, you can let it deter you in ways where you avoid it, avoid certain situations that cause it, or you could face it head on and grow from it. Anxiety is a natural part of life, and it's what you do with it that really matters.
Yeah,
So
no,
at that
I
time,
agree.
at that juncture in my life, I chose to face it head on, become a licensed foster parent, and actually fostered um, probably the max for not all at one time,
Right.
not that crazy, but I fostered a max of 4 children altogether, all at
I remember
at
that
any
time.
given point. So um, and again, anxiety is when I've made decisions in my life that were very anxiety provoking, but I pushed myself because um, I knew if I didn't do it, I'd regret it. And every time I faced it head on, I always grew from it and became a better person and more comfortable in my skin.
I'm really glad to hear you say that, Scott, because now I'm going to hold that you to that, and I'm going to put a challenge out there. You need to get laid.
Well, that's not it's not like
Is that a choice
but yeah,
that
but
you
this is the
make?
thing. Getting laid is not I'm not getting laid because I'm anxious about it. It's just not necessarily my priority.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is you not? I know that you're not in a relationship,
Right.
and that you haven't been actually in a long time.
Well, ever.
So, is that a choice that you're making?
Yes. Yes. It's a choice I've made because, again, independence for me is a double-edged sword. I'm independent and can do things on my own, but the double edge is I'm independent and I can do things on my own. So I've never had a need to have a partner. Now, again, one of the things I look at is I've never had one, so I don't know what I'm missing. So I don't long for that because I've
So
never had that before. But again, it's certainly, is it ideal to be, living life and being alone for most of life? Again, I don't see myself alone. I have my group of friends who I never feel alone. I have my work. I'm very social. Um, I'm not an introvert like that. But when it comes to being intimate with someone and having a partner, I think a lot of the reasons why I don't is because I've had so many losses in my life that I have this fear of being abandoned by people. So I protect myself by not ever letting down that wall enough. I've had people who've wanted to have a relationship with me, and I've come up with reasons why not to or whatever. And I'm very conscious of this. But I have this wall that I've always had up, and I've never allowed myself for it to come down to allow someone in to let that wall down, you know? And that is a conscious choice, you know? And honestly, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
yeah,
I'm at a point and I'm at an age where maybe 25, 30 years ago, that would have been something I should deal with and come to terms with. But um, the only hindrance I've ever received from it was I've never had a partner, someone to share my life with. And I've shared it with friends and family and coworkers, and I'm okay with that. I'm very content, you know, and I'm good with that. I've never been one of these people that, you know, though there's many times I'm alone, I'm not alone. I think loneliness is again
you
perception.
prefer to be alone. You prefer to be by yourself, don't you?
I prefer to be by myself. Absolutely. Again, it's something I'm very used to. I'm very comfortable with. I travel by myself. I go to restaurants by myself. I do a lot of stuff by myself, and I'm very, very okay with that. In fact, I prefer that.
Do you meet
I
people when you're
prefer to
out?
do stuff like that.
Do you meet people when you're out, or are you just to yourself?
Um, I mean, I probably stay to myself. I'm not one to go out and start meeting people and saying, "Hey, how are you doing?" I'm not like that. Um, but I again don't mind going out by myself and not concerned about how I'm perceived by other people about being by myself. And I think nowadays, I think the current climate, I think more people do that and more people are comfortable doing that. I don't think people judge you for being alone like that as they did maybe 20 or 30 years ago.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I'm with you. No, I mean, whether you're straight or you're gay, I think
Yeah,
I
that's
th I
it's not
think that,
nothing to do with being straight or gay. I think it's just
people
the
people
person
view
you are.
sexuality different than they did back when we were back when it was forming for us. I mean, if you listen to, like, listen to the '80s, like, hair metal music. I mean, listen to a lot of the music that we listened to back during that time. It was all about sex.
Well, I mean, actually, if you look at all the music now, it's all about sex. It's just different.
But
Sex is a
maybe they're not
very
having it.
major part of entertainment, music, everything, you
Yeah.
know?
So, I do want to point out, and I know that we've talked about you being gay a lot on this episode, but what really I really appreciated when we met prior to this episode, when, like, a pre-meeting, um, you talked about how you're more than just gay. Your being gay is just a part of who you are, and it really makes me think about how that's so true. It's like, I'm straight and I don't like people don't
That's not
judge
how you
me.
define yourself.
Right. It's not how I define myself. And um, I'm sure people see me that way because I don't think I give off a gaydar or anything like that.
I don't know, that's maybe a different subject we could talk about.
When I did have my Corvette, I was like propositioned a lot, which I never took. It's like kind of pissed me off, honestly. Um, but I was flattered. I was flattered. But when they kept on like insisting, I was like, no. And that to me is just you're being a jerk. You know, I'm flattered if you ask, but when I say no, you know, I'm not asking you to hit on me harder. But then that again teaches me about being single. And when I was single, I would always, put that pressure on women that I was, you know, sexually attracted to. I mean, that's the way it was.
Well, I mean, I think we touched upon it earlier. Is like, not defining yourself by your sexuality, but that you're amalgam of many different
Yeah.
things.
It's a
Um,
part of you.
well, yeah, it's a part of it, but even a bigger part of me, I think, is more like you had mentioned in the beginning, is my profession, is the mental health profession. I've been in the mental health field 35 years, and I'm going to be 60 next year, and I've never been in any other field other than mental health. And um, I don't, I can only speak for me, but I truly love what I do. In the beginning, I worked with patients who had a serious mental illness like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. I then started working with children in foster care and did that for several years. I actually ran an organization where I would match foster care children with mentors. That's kind of how I became a foster parent, was because I saw such a need.
Yeah.
And then started working in corrections, and I've been in corrections probably for 23 years. And not only just working in corrections, but while I've been in corrections, there was a time when I moved to Maryland and was working for an organization where I was the director of quality assurance and an operations manager, where I was traveling all throughout the country to different jails and supervising the mental health professionals in those jails, starting mental
Hmm.
health services in those jails, and that's something. And again, I always go back to making decisions that challenge you. Um, I was asked to do something like that, and I never thought I would be able to do something. I was like, I am not a people person like that where I can go out and, you know, supervise and have to
Right.
talk in front of crowds and, do all that kind of stuff. But I pushed myself and challenged myself to do that, to see if I could. And not only did it, but I did a pretty good job. I did that for about 4 years, where, I was a director and administrator for a national organization. Um, but then I also realized that my true calling was working with patients. As an administrator, I was doing a lot of administrative duties, and I enjoyed it and I was fulfilled by it. And I realized I could do it, but was that really what I wanted to do? No. So I decided to go back to Florida and work in corrections, where I was working one on one with patients. And have done that ever since. When I moved out to Colorado, which was a very anxiety provoking decision, um, I was offered a position as a supervisor, and I did that for a month or two, but decided I didn't want to do that because that's not who I am. I can do it, but I didn't want to do that. So, been working with patients ever since, and I love it. I mean, to this day, and
That's,
not a lot of people can say that they're doing something they enjoy for so many decades, but I truly enjoy, working one on one with people. And the bigger thing is just I'm a good listener. You know, and listening is a very active skill that not a lot of people have. Um, Listening doesn't require you listening and then telling them what your point of view is. Listening is really listening to what a person's saying and feeling. And
hmm
that's a very active skill that you have to really throw yourself into. So that's one of the things I think I really excel in, is that skill. And to this day, and hopefully to the day, well, I don't like to say the word retire because I can't see myself doing that anytime soon, but working in corrections up until the day I'm not able to do it anymore,
So is
you
that how you
know?
want to fill your life? Just working all your life?
Well, again, I don't see it as working like, 9 to 5 grinding. I enjoy going to work. I don't mind it at all. I can't see myself not doing that because I just being sedentary, I just would not necessarily be the best thing for me. I'm not a sedentary person. I have to keep doing something. I really enjoy it. So why not keep doing something you enjoy? You know, um, if it was a hobby that you enjoyed, you'd keep doing, and
Yeah.
this is something I really enjoy.
So you made you corrected me earlier, when we met about the differences between a profession and a career. And so you have you're a mental health professional, but you have a career, your career is your job basically. And you have a calling generally when you have a profession, which is a profession of how you want to live your life, really. And what you just explained is living on your terms. You made specific choices about your life and how you want to live your life. That I know, has had a financial consequence because you had a supervisor's job paying more money, but then you're not happy doing that. So
Well,
you're willing to take the steps to take a step back. I you know, I think that's a different way of looking at life. You can you can try to keep uh, growing your income and keep moving up that ladder. I mean, I know I faced that same career kind of the same questions. Should I do that? But my choice is no, I really want to stay where I am. I really like what I do. I'm very comfortable in it. It's still growing, um, but I make enough money to where, I don't want to cause myself additional anxiety, like you said, and pushing myself into a new role. Um, it's just not worth the extra money to
and I
me.
don't get enjoyment out of it. I mean, I could be a
Right.
supervisor and make more money, but making more money isn't necessarily what I want. At this stage of my life, I want to be able to enjoy what I'm doing. I've been there and done that, making money and taking positions, not necessarily never been just financial because I'm not that kind of person, but I benefited from it financially by making those decisions. But now I'm really at a point where I really want to enjoy what I'm doing. And don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm just scraping by. I've been in the profession long enough where I'm doing okay, and I'm okay. I'm financially doing okay. But um, of
Dude,
course,
I
if
know
I
that
was a
was you have made some huge, huge decisions. When you were in Florida, I really did not like visiting you because you lived in, I hate to say it, but the ghetto. There were gunshots.
okay, there
You
was a
basically
reason for me living in that
you ran from
situation.
your car like down low. You ducked down low and ran
Oh,
to
no, it
your car
wasn't
to
like
the
that,
door.
John.
It
Let's
was
not exaggerate. But
machine
I
guns, gang. You
okay,
had to learn
listen.
the gang sign to get into the parking lot. I'm just kidding.
So I did live in a situation where, if again, 20 years ago, I would never have thought I would be living in that situation. But I chose to live in a place that was not expensive, so that way I could save
Right,
enough money to get something nice.
right.
So
And
4 years, I really lived in
I know I'm
a
making fun of
complex
you.
where it was not a good situation.
I know
Um,
I'm making fun of you.
I
Um,
know, but it was a big
and
sacrifice. I mean, it was, like you said, in a really bad part of
and I
town
would
and
want
a
to
lot
stay
of
there.
people.
I think I stayed there one night when everyone was gathered to go on the cruise. But um, I mean, I was so relieved when you got out of there. But you're willing to make that sacrifice to get to a better place,
Yes.
and that did serve you extremely, extremely well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I moved into a condo that was amazing. I mean, it was really one of these a coinky dink that I happened to come across it when I was looking, and it was right before COVID. That I got it, which was surprising because I mean, the deal almost fell through. If it'd been a month or 2 later, I don't know if I would have gotten it because everything shut down. So it came at a time right before COVID that I got the condo, and was there for 3 years until I moved to Colorado, back to Colorado, you know?
Yeah.
Which let's kinda talk about that. I mean, that to move I mean, I've never wanted to stay in Florida. That was never what I mean, I only went to Florida because my family's there, but I hated living in Florida. I hated the no seasons. I hated sweating. It was maybe cold 1 day a year. It was just and I don't like sweating. And Florida, that's all you do is sweat. So I knew that as I was getting older, I needed to figure where I was gonna live and to lay my head at some point permanently, um, and I needed to make a move then. And it happened that one of our friends moved back to Colorado, who was there in the early 90s when I moved there to begin with. And I said, you know what? I loved it out there. I think I'm going to go out there. So I moved out there with no job, sold my condo, went out there and didn't know what I was going to do. And moved out by myself my entire life, my entire everything in a U-Haul and drove across the country by myself and made a home out here and ended up getting a job in corrections, believe it or not. And doing very well right now and present day. And love my job, and get along with the deputies and my coworkers and really enjoy it. So it really worked itself out and really worked out really well for my on my behalf.
So how anxiety ridden were you when you're driving that U-Haul truck full with everything that you own and you're driving across the country by
Well, I
yourself,
mean,
right?
what?
You were by yourself as well too, right?
And that was a choice. My sister had asked if she could come with me, and I really made a choice to do it by myself because as I'm driving, I stopped in Gainesville where we graduated, University of Florida. I stopped there for a couple days. Then I, went up to my sister's. So as I was going across the country, I kind of processed my journey so that when I got here, and again, I mean, I didn't come here and was like gung ho. I mean, I had a rough transition period, a really rough one, probably one of the roughest ones I've had in my entire life. Um, but I worked through it. I went back to look, if I could do what I've done, I can get through this. I will find something. I will be okay. I will make it. And I worked through those issues. I worked through my insecurities. Um, and end up getting a really good job. And again, I don't know if I could do something like that now, or I don't know if I would, um, because I'm also at an age where I don't want to put myself through that kind of stress. And that was probably one of the most stressful periods of my life is making that kind of decision and actually following through. I'm glad I did it, but it was a very anxiety provoking, stressful situation, you know?
So I don't see you making decisions and then going back on them later.
No, I've
So
never gone back on it. The only thing, I mean, I don't even know it was going back when I left Maryland and decided to come back to Florida. It was because I didn't want to do administrative work. I really wanted to, do what I did from the very beginning is work with patients. So I don't see that as going backward. I just see as becoming more focused and realizing what I didn't want to do. So I've never ever gone backwards. I've never, like, oh, it's not working here in Colorado. Let me go back to Florida. Um, I did that when I first went to Colorado in the early 90s. I came back to Florida because it wasn't working out in Colorado financially. So I decided to come back and I was with my parents for a while, and stayed at the house for a while. That probably was the time when I went backwards because I had to start over. But again, what came out of that was I worked in mental health with kids, and that allowed me a whole different type of confidence I didn't have before, you
Hmm.
know? So again, I took a situation that could have grounded me and hindered me, and I really learned from it and pushed myself, and really grew from it, but that probably was the only time I've ever really gone backwards per se, you know?
So, so throughout your life, I've seen this growth mindset, continuously learning, continuously growing.
And
Did you?
pushing myself. I mean, I don't know if it's just like I'm gonna grow from this. I always push myself to do something that made me uncomfortable. So it's always pushing myself, you know?
So is
That
that
was the way
to?
I looked at it.
So that causes pain, and I know I do. I do the same thing. So this question is to help me understand it as well. So something so uncomfortable, it causes anxiety, but we still make the decision to do it and move forward.
Well, not everyone does, and there's nothing wrong with making a decision of not heading on that anxiety. I mean, there's nothing wrong. Anxiety is a natural part of our life. Um, Moving forward or pushing through it is not necessarily what everyone should do. It's what you're comfortable with. It doesn't define you as a person. I can only speak through my experience, and I've pushed through it. Um, and I happen to come out a better person. That's not necessarily going to be everyone's experience with anxiety.
Yeah, I don't think this show honestly appeals to everybody. And there's a certain person I think that watches a Swift Kick in the Ass podcast. And it's people who want to change their lives and are looking really for inspiration, I think, and um, to learn an opportunity to learn from others. I know I've learned a lot from you, uh, not only what to do, but also what not to do. I mean, that is all part of it too, and that's not putting you down. That's just like I loved my father, and I learned so much from him, but I also learned equally amount equal amounts, maybe more, of things what not to do with my
Right,
life,
right,
which is, the Swift Kicking Ass is about positive motivation, positive force moving you forward. And Scott, you're exemplary, honestly. Yeah,
well, I don't think I'm really all that. I think there's plenty of people that are in the same situation that have pushed through things. And again, I am who I am. Again, I'm very, very happy with the person I've turned out to be and continue to become because no one is ever done growing and changing. And the moment you think that you're done is the moment that is your
you
downfall,
die, right? Yeah.
you know? So I see myself as a product of my experiences, and there's yeah, the way I can explain it is I have an internal locus of control. Anything that happens to me, I learn from, and I have a say so in what happens to me. Where an external locus of control is when you feel that you're a product of what's thrown at you, and that you're just not a victim, but necessarily caught up in the turbulence, and that you're just flailing through life. And I've never been that kind of person. I kind of take control. I'm a control freak, as you know.
Yes.
Um, I like to do things when I want, what I want, um, and push myself to do things that, um, am I be able to do something like that? And again, thankfully I've survived everything I've gone through. So I don't think I'm exemplary. I think there's plenty of people out there who do the same thing. Um, and those people who are not necessarily stuck, but um, at a standstill or at a crossroads, hopefully this inspires them to maybe get a swift kick in the ass and make a choice of pushing themselves to do something that necessarily isn't comfortable, because again, the more you learn about yourself, the better off you're going to be. Whether it's a negative outcome or a positive outcome, you're going to learn something, and that's always a benefit to you.
Hmm. You know what? That And I don't know if we could wrap up the episode better than you just did, because I was going to ask for some closing remarks. But that's honestly, I think, perfect, Scott. Um,
Well, thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show. I'm so glad that we did this finally. And you know, as I've mentioned several times, Scott is single. You know, he likes black guys.
This is not a dating app.
I think you're going on mute on that point. I lost your whatever you said, but you know, reach out to me, you know, listeners, if you're interested in Scott, and I'll pass these things along to him. So the perfect way to end. Look how red he is. I love it. So this is John Curran on a Swift Kick in the Ass podcast. I'm with my longtime friend Scott Kesson. Really hope you enjoyed the episode, got something out of it. And until the next time, peace.